Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center, and welcome to Knife AQ episode 118, the Knife series, where I answer all your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. This week, we have some good ones to get through. We're going to be talking a little bit about the advantages of a Tanto blade. We're going to be giving some non-legal legal advice, and taking a look, or having some fun, with acronyms at the very least. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you, everyone who has submitted your questions for this series. If you have a question and you want to submit it, just like the ones that are showing up here, just drop them in the comments section below, and we'll pick a few out for the next episode, per usual. First question today comes from Andre Kloppers. If you haven't already, could you explain a bit about Tanto knives? The origins, what popularized them, best use cases, disadvantages, if any, yada yada. Yes, absolutely. So we've kind of covered the difference between the Japanese style Tantos versus the Western or American style Tantos before. There's a video, we'll try to leave a link for it here up in the corner, or at least down in the description box, certainly. Origins come from the Japanese side, but I think what you're probably thinking about, what most people think about in the United States at least, is the Western style Tanto. So that's what I'm going to focus on a little bit here for the second half of your question. I have a Cold Steel Voyager right here, and more than anyone else, Cold Steel almost single-handedly, I would say, is responsible for the popularization of this blade shape here in the West. Not completely single-handedly. I know there's other examples and stuff out there, but far and away, in terms of spreading the gospel of the Tanto, you gotta go to Cold Steel here. Basically, the advantages of this style of Western Tanto, more than anything else, is tip strength. You've got, in this case, a flat ground, robust tip, hollow ground behind it, although that's not necessarily a prerequisite. We've got Tantos like this Demco Free Rein right here that don't have a hollow grind on the back section. But the idea is something that could stand up to heavy-duty thrusting and piercing jobs. Not necessarily the most acute piercing needs, but when you need strength, this is going to grant you, which they've kind of famously or infamously, one could say, demonstrated in their proof videos. The whole stabbing through car hoods thing, Tanto's going to give you a good advantage for that sort of task. Are you stabbing through car hoods day to day? I'm certainly not. Thomas, I don't even think you have.
Hoods are expensive.
Your wayward ways. That's very true. Not enough Bondo in the world for some of yours as it begins with, so add more holes.
No.
Yeah, it's no good. Day-to-day stuff, if you were to EDC a Tanto blade, I'd say that the advantages are you still get a robust tip, and if you're pushing through some heavier duty materials, thicker cardboard, tough plastics, etc., that is still going to be an advantage. But also, because this is a Western style Tanto and you have the acute or the actual change in the point here as opposed to a more gradual Japanese style Tanto, you can actually use this leading edge for kind of scraping tasks, almost like a chisel, whether you're actually removing material or scraping things. A frequent example that's given is like scraping stickers or scraping things off of a surface. That could be an advantage. Disadvantages, well, different blade shapes might pierce better if less robustly, but I'd say the only real thing might be they're a little trickier to sharpen, but it's also real easy to actually figure out what you need to do there. And really you just need to treat each edge like a separate blade. You're sharpening this section and then you're sharpening the front section separately. So a little bit trickier, but hardly an impediment, hardly something that's not easy to get around. Combined with the lack of belly versus some other styles of blade, it might be a little less slicey. So that's just something you have to consider relating in how it relates to your uses. That's about it. I can't believe I missed an opportunity for my pun there right at the beginning.
Oh well.
I had it in my head and I'm gonna deliver it right now.
Sorry, guys, I tried.
Everyone, just pretend I said this at the beginning. So, Andre, it sounds like you're asking if there's a point to a Tanto. And yes, there is. In fact, there are two. One's here, one's here. I regret nothing.
Hope that helps.
Next question comes from Stephen Biko. Hey, DCA, was wondering if a Tanto-style blade could be useful for a survival knife. And if possible, a stainless steel would be nice. I'm willing to pay any price for a good knife. Thanks, keep up the good work.
Be careful with that language.
Well, I'm not going to cost you too much money if you go with what I'm going to show here, although this is hardly the only option. I'm kind of going to focus on the first part of the question mostly. Does a Tanto have a place in a quote-unquote survival knife? And I gotta say, if you know what you're doing, if your technique's up, your blade skills are there, your knowledge is there, you'll be able to do pretty much anything you need to do in a quote-unquote survival situation with a Tanto style blade, as seen on this Demco Free Rein. Because after all, I mean, the original survival knife, it came before the 1980s, actually. But you know, a chipped piece of rock was the original survival knife, and that's worked out for humanity pretty well so far. I mean, it got us here, didn't it? So yes, you could absolutely use a Tanto in a survival situation. Most people don't, I would say. And the reason that, you know, drop points and clip points, which you could also get on this Demco Free Rein, this drop point profile here, the reason people tend to gravitate towards these more is the belly that you get here. And that is going to be more conducive to things, and this is not just survival, but any kind of outdoor task, which survival is kind of, you know, a subset or a subgenre of. That bellied style of blade is going to be more useful for slicing tasks and for skinning and game preparation especially. Food prep as well, that belly is going to come in real handy. And some people prefer being able to work with that curving edge during certain carving tasks and that sort of thing. Let me see, I'm just checking my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything there. Yeah. Drop points, clip points tend to be preferred for those reasons, but why be like everyone else? Go for it. Go for the Tanto, practice your skills. The chiseling aspect of that front end especially could be real handy when doing some fine bushcrafty type stuff, making notches, fine detail work like that. It's just gonna be a little bit different than the other blade style. But I support your endeavor. All right, next question comes from Josh McManus. As we've all heard, you're not lawyers. Very true. However, what is the most legal pocket knife for all 50 states? Second and third most legal for bonus considerations. All right, so some people will look at this argument and say, to heck with everyone else, to heck with whatever the regulations are. I'm going to carry whatever I want, and to heck with it. You know, that's your choice.
See how it works out for you.
And honestly, that's your choice, and I don't fault you for it. You know, I love this Cold Steel Voyager that I showed you a little bit earlier, but this is not always going to be the knife I want to pick, especially when I need to be a little more circumspect. And that gets to the root of my personal criteria for a knife that's quote unquote legal everywhere. And that is not just something that complies to whatever the local regulation has to be, but also how it's perceived. And ultimately, and sometimes that perception is going to be even more important than whether something meets the literal letter of the law. Because if something goes unnoticed, then it goes unnoticed. So even better. So here's my non-legal legal criteria that I personally subscribe to for this, and that's a 2.5-inch blade, non-locking. A 3-inch blade will get you by most places that do have a blade length restriction in place, but there are a few in my personal life, the city of Boston for one. I've got a family that lives up in that area that require or prohibit anything over a 2.5-inch blade, and that stinks. But sometimes I choose to play nice. So the classic, easy answer for something that's legal everywhere is the least scary looking thing in the world, and that's a Swiss Army knife. And the Swiss Army Classic SD is about as incognito and unnoticeable as it gets. And they're pretty inexpensive too. I mean, start around $20 to $30 from some of them are, I think, even less nowadays. Or for the same size, even better recommendation, in my personal opinion, is the Rambler. It has the same tools as the classic SD. You've got scissors, nail file and flathead, toothpick and tweezers, the small pen blade, but it adds this combination tool with a cap lifter and a Phillips screwdriver, and it moves the blade to the side opposite the split ring here. So it's easier to use the knife blade while it's still on your key ring if you're carrying it that way. These are like $33 nowadays. Doesn't get much more quote unquote legal everywhere than that. But Swiss Army knives like always seem to get a pass. You can go look at some other small keychain multi-tools too, like the Gerber Dime would be a good choice. These are like $24. And you can go for this if you want something that actually has a small set of pliers, spring-loaded in this case. And a couple other tools as well. If you want something a little more full size than these keychain sized ones, take a look at a lot of classic case knives will work, but other Swiss Army knives, such as any of the 84 millimeter models, such as this Sportsman right here. Stuff like the Bantam, the Cadet also fit into this criteria. This is as large as you can go on a classic red-handled Swiss Army knife that still has the blade just under that 2.5-inch mark, which again is my personal criteria for the choices I make for this situation. The 91 millimeter, like what are some of those?
I don't know.
The Tinker series, the Compact, Classic, the Explorer, classic stuff for everyday carry. The blade's a little bit over 2.5 inches. Even my beloved Evo Grip series, just over 2.5 inches. But this Sportsman is a really nice little tool. I do wish they made more 84 millimeter size tools with scissors. They don't currently, unfortunately. But this has the same tools as the Cadet. It has the file, bottle opener, and can opener, each with flathead drivers. The can opener's driver can also work on some small Phillips stuff, and your main blade. But because you have the standard red scales and not the Alox aluminum, you also get a screwdriver on the back. You get the awl, and you get toothpick and tweezers. And price on this, actually, this is interesting. This is less expensive than the Rambler currently, which is the smaller knife. This is like $31. Really solid option right there. So for me, that's where I start. I tend to always, have a multi-tool like a Swiss Army knife or a small Leatherman lately, in addition to my primary folder. And if you want a primary folder that is a legal everywhere thing, non-legal advice, here's the choice I've made. I've been pairing everything lately with my Leatherman Juice CS4, slightly modified, sadly discontinued, however, but this gets me a sub 2.5-inch blade, and I pair it with the Lil Native Slip It from Spyderco, because it hits the 2.5-inch, it hits the non-locking, but it doesn't give up the other modern pocket knife conveniences. Namely, you've got one hand opening, a pocket clip, and some safety involved, even without a lock. And that safety is achieved by the design of this finger choil here that is half on the blade, half on the handle itself. So what it does is it allows a full 4-fingered grip on the knife handle, but because your finger is on the front half or the back part of that blade right there, if the blade happens to close, since it's a non-locking knife, your fingers are going to keep it from closing further, or should keep it from closing further, I should say, and rotating around and cutting yourself. Very, very nice thing right there. And I like the way Spyderco does it so that the edge of the blade stops before you hit that finger choil. So you're not, kissing the back of that edge with your hand. Easy to operate, one-handed, both open and closed. I even added a Lynch Northwest deep carry pocket clip on there to keep it even more kind of out of sight, out of mind. And what's really nice about this knife, I bought it because I wanted a knife that was 2.5 inches and non-locking and made in the US. So that's why I bought it. But what I appreciate about it now, having carried it a bit, is it has a bit more substance to it than you might think. It's not a beefy, hard use folder, but it's not a shrinking violet either. It has some substantive feel to it that doesn't make you feel like you're kind of giving up too much to hit those kind of benchmarks that we're looking for. Really cool knife. I really enjoy it, whether I need the non-locking part of it or not. It's just a nice knife to use day to day. About actually about just under 150 bucks. If you want something less expensive, the Spyderco Squeak has a 2-inch blade for about $62. That's with a synthetic handle. You could do what I did before I had the Native, and that was take the Spyderco Urban Lightweight. That's like a $66 knife, but you have to shorten the blade just a little bit. And I used like a Dremel tool back in the day. It's like a 2.6-inch knife. It just needs a little bit, shaved a little bit off the spine and brought the tip down. So that works really well. Or the SOG Stout SJ will work as well, but the edge on that knife does go through the choil, so it's not quite offering the same kind of safety that this Spyderco does, but that's like a $60 knife as well with D2 steel. So you can check those out too if you wish. Oh, and the other advantage of carrying, both styles, whether you've got Swiss Army knife and a non-locker here, is you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the modern conveniences, but if you really are in a situation where you don't want to draw too much attention for yourself, you can always pull out that Swiss Army knife. In addition to having the extra features that make a multi-tool worth having on hand, it still has a knife blade on it too. So combine those there, you're good to go. And now we come to our lightning round for today. First question comes from CCL26. Hi DCA, what knife has the most opening options? I was just introduced to the Spyderco Thumbhole, and it got me thinking, is there a knife that has every opening option available? Well, what my mind goes to first is the Kaiser Cormorant. This one right here happens to be a KnifeCenter exclusive with a 4V blade, black linen micarta handles for 119 bucks. But the standard versions have some black and white G10s, I think with 20 CV. Actually, there's a handful of options now. You can check out the full series. And this has, when it's closed, you can see, rather unconventional look, but this works both as a conventional flipper as well as a front flipper. Watch as I mangle this. It has a front flipper. I've seen other people use it quite effectively. I'm just a bit of a klutz at front flippers most of the time. It also has a thumb hole, so you can do... I'm really making this, really selling this, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
It's got the reverse flick. It's got your standard thumb opening. It's got the front flip. People. And the other thing it has an advantage of over other stuff like, there's liner and frame locking knives out there that can do all of these types of opening methods too, but you've also got the button lock on this particular knife, which allows opening it without touching the blade at all. Just push the button, flick your wrist, and you can open and close it real easily. So plenty of different ways to open that as the situation warrants or as you desire. And a cool knife to boot. Next question comes from Jatki24300. Can you show us an Italian-made knife without a crown spine? Sure thing. Yeah, a lot of Italian knives tend to come with a crown spine. Actually, it doesn't have that, which is a cool feature, but not everyone likes it or wants it. Check out the MKM Goccia. This one right here is a KnifeCenter exclusive with the red lava carbon fiber, fat carbon fiber, I should say. And it has a flat spine. It's a cool knife. Jens Anso design, about 250 bucks, M390 blade. It happens to flip open really nicely. I really like the graceful shape of this knife. And no crown spine, if that's what you're looking for. Next question. Ben MJ says there aren't enough red knives, especially red fixed blades. Well, I mean, by sheer numbers, there's definitely more red-handled Swiss Army knives out there than any other pocket knife. Probably more red-handled Swiss Army knives out there than every other pocket knife combined. It would not surprise me at all. That's a sarcastic answer, so I'm sorry for that. And now we come to our final question of the day, which is, of course, our most serious question of the day, which today comes from Quinn Curlew. FAQ MSQ, DCA, SOG FDE OTF for EDC CQC,
A-OK,
TBH YMMV IMHO DE FTW. Hope that helps. HTH?
sure.
Sure. Why not? That's all we've got time for today, folks. Thanks for sticking around, and thanks for your questions. Make sure to leave them in the comment section below if you want a chance to get featured in the next episode. If you want to get your hands on any of these knives, check the links in the description. They will take you to KnifeCenter.com. And don't forget about our Knife Rewards program, because if you're going to buy one of these knives today, it's really great to earn some free money to spend on your next ones. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera, and we're signing off. See you next time.